Prince Dae-ho Kim stood in the massive hall of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. The ceiling stretched so high above him that he could barely see where it ended. Alien voices echoed off the crystal walls as dozens of different species argued in their strange languages. The air smelled of ozone and something sweet that made his nose wrinkle. He adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform and checked his translator device one more time. Today would be important. Today he would finally present the evidence that the Vrexian hegemony was attacking human colonies in the Outer Rim. Today the galaxy would have to listen. At 28 years old, Dae-ho had spent the last 6 years of his life learning to speak carefully around aliens. His father, Emperor Taejun Kim, had sent him to Nexus Prime to represent humanity in the Galactic Council. The job required patience. It required smiles and polite words even when the other species looked down on humans as primitive newcomers. The Vrexians were the worst of them all. Chancellor Vorthak was a massive serpent-like creature with 4 arms and scales that changed color when he was angry. He spoke in a hissing voice that the translator made sound calm and reasonable, but Dae-ho could see the hatred in his yellow eyes. The Vrexians had been expanding their territory for centuries. Now they wanted the resource-rich worlds that humans had colonized in the Outer Rim. "The session will now begin," announced moderator Kixtal, a floating jellyfish-like being whose tentacles glowed different colors when it spoke. "Prince Dae-ho of the Terran Empire has requested time to address territorial disputes in Sector 7. Dae-ho walked to the center of the hall. Hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. Some belonged to the bird-like avian consortium, others to the crystalline collective representatives who looked like living diamonds. Most of them had been part of this council for longer than humans had. "Known about space travel. Honored delegates," Dae-ho began, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. 3 months ago, the Vrexian hegemony seized control of the human colony on Kepler 442b. They claimed it was a territorial correction based on old star charts. Chancellor Vorthak's scales shifted to a darker green. "The human colonies were established in violation of established boundaries," he hissed. "We merely reclaimed what was rightfully ours." Dae-ho activated his holographic display. Images of the mining colony appeared in the air above him. Families working in the asteroid fields, children playing in the biodome parks, ordinary people trying to build a life among the stars. "These people had been living on Kepler 442b for 15 years. Dae-ho said. "They built homes, schools, hospitals. They followed all galactic colonization protocols. They registered their settlement with this very council." "Paperwork errors," Vorthak replied with what sounded like a laugh. "The humans are still learning proper procedures." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the alien delegates. Dae-ho felt his jaw clench but kept his voice calm. This was how it always went. No matter what evidence he presented, the council found ways to dismiss human concerns. "The colonists were given 12 hours to evacuate," Dae-ho continued. 12 hours to abandon everything they had built. Families were separated. People lost everything they owned. Ambassador Hyejin Park, sitting in the human delegation area, gave him a small nod of encouragement. She had been his mentor for the past 3 years, teaching him how to navigate the complex web of galactic politics. She believed that patience and persistence would eventually win the council over to humanity's side. Archon Skrilth of the Avian Consortium ruffled his golden feathers. "Unfortunate, certainly," he said in his high, musical voice. "But such relocations happen frequently as borders are refined. Surely compensation can be arranged." "Compensation?" Dae-ho's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. "These people lost their homes. Their entire lives were destroyed." "The humans will adapt," said a collective representative, her crystal body chiming softly as she spoke. "Your species has shown remarkable flexibility in the past." More murmurs of agreement. Daeho looked around the hall and saw the same expression on every alien face. Mild sympathy mixed with indifference. To them, humans were still children playing at being a galactic power. Their problems were minor inconveniences not worthy of serious attention. "There is more," Daeho said, activating another series of holograms. Intelligence reports suggest that the Vrexians are planning additional territorial corrections in the Outer Rim. 7 more human colonies are at risk. Vorthak's scales shifted to an angry red. "The prince spreads unfounded rumors," he hissed. "The hegemony has no plans for further expansion." "Then you won't object to a neutral investigation of your military movements in Sector 7, Daeho replied. The Chancellor's 4 arms spread wide in what his species considered a dismissive gesture. The hegemony does not submit to human suspicions. Debate continued for 2 more hours. Daeho presented detailed star charts showing Vrexian fleet movements. He showed communication intercepts suggesting coordination with other species. He even had testimony from refugees who had witnessed Vrexian forces preparing for additional strikes. None of it mattered. The council voted to establish a committee to study the situation. The committee would report back in 6 months. Until then, the Vrexian claims to the disputed territories would be considered valid pending further review. Daeho felt something cold settle in his stomach as the session ended. 6 months. In 6 months, how many more colonies would be lost? How many more families would be scattered across the galaxy? As the delegates filed out of the hall, Ambassador Hyajin approached him. She was a small woman in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of galactic politics. "You did well today," she said quietly. "These things take time. Rome wasn't built in a day." "Rome didn't have to deal with the Galactic Council," Daeho replied, trying to keep the bitterness out of his voice. Hyajin placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Patience, Your Highness. We're building relationships here. Trust. The other species need time to see that we're not the aggressive primitives they think we are." Daeho nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere. As they walked back to the human embassy, his secure communicator buzzed. A message from his sister, Captain So-Young Kim. Priority urgent. Eyes only. That night, alone in his quarters, Daeho opened the encrypted file. What he saw changed everything. The footage was grainy, taken from a long-range reconnaissance probe. It showed the colony of New Sol in the Kepler system. Daeho had visited there 2 years ago during a diplomatic tour. He remembered the cherry blossom trees they had planted in the central square, the children's laughter echoing through the habitat domes. Now those domes were shattered. The cherry trees burned to ash, and moving through the ruins were Vrexian shock troops in their distinctive powered armor. But it was what came next that shattered something inside Daeho's chest. The Vrexians had rounded up the human survivors in the town square. Men, women, children. Families he recognized from his visit. The colony administrator, Park Min-ho, tried to shield his young daughter with his body. The Vrexian commander raised his plasma weapon. The footage cut out. Daeho stared at the blank screen for a long time. His hands were shaking. The diplomatic protocols he had spent years mastering seemed suddenly meaningless. The careful words and patient negotiations felt like a joke in the face of what he had just witnessed. His secure communicator buzzed again. Another message from So-Young. New Sol is gone. Over 3,000 dead, including women and children. The Vrexians are calling it a police action against human insurgents. The Galactic Council is already preparing statements about the tragic misunderstanding. Daeho closed his eyes and saw Ambassador Hyajin's face, her belief in patience and diplomacy, her faith that the galaxy would eventually accept humanity as equals if they just proved themselves worthy. 3,000 people were dead. 3,000 men, women, and children who had trusted the system to protect them. When he opened his eyes again, Prince Daeho Kim was gone. In his place sat someone harder, someone who understood that words meant nothing when backed by weakness, someone who had finally learned the most important lesson of galactic politics. Some things could only be answered with blood. 3 days after watching the footage from New Seoul, Prince Daeho stood in the docking bay of Nexus Prime's military station. The massive battle cruiser Retribution hung in space before him like a sleeping giant. Its dark hull stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Commander Jin-Woo Lee waited beside the shuttle ramp, his face worried. He had been Daeho's best friend since childhood, back when they were both just boys dreaming of adventures among the stars. Now Jin-Woo served as the Retribution's tactical officer, and those dreams had turned into something much darker. "Your Highness," Jin-Woo said quietly as Daeho approached. "Are you sure about this? Your father's orders were very clear. The Terran Empire is not at war with the Vrexian hegemony." Daeho stopped and looked up at the warship. "My father sits on his throne on Earth and listens to his advisors tell him about diplomatic solutions. He hasn't seen what I've seen. But taking the Retribution without authorization, this is mutiny. They'll court-martial the entire crew. Only if we lose." Daeho stepped onto the shuttle. "Are you with me or not?" Jin-Woo stared at his friend for a long moment. Then he followed him aboard. "I've been with you since we were 10 years old. I'm not stopping now." The shuttle docked with the Retribution 20 minutes later. As Daeho walked through the ship's corridors, he could feel the crew watching him. Word had already spread about his plan. Some looked excited, others seemed afraid. All of them knew that their lives were about to change forever. Captain Yoon Sang-min met them at the bridge entrance. He was a veteran of the border wars, a man who had earned his rank through blood and courage rather than politics. His weathered face showed no emotion as he saluted. "Your Highness," he said, "I've received new orders from Earth. We're to return immediately for a full investigation of your activities." Daeho nodded. "I know. I sent those orders myself using my diplomatic codes." The captain raised an eyebrow. "Sir?" "Captain Sang-min, how long have you served in the Imperial Navy?" 23 years, Your Highness. In those 23 years, how many human colonies have you watched burn while politicians debated proper response protocols?" The captain's jaw tightened. "Too many, sir. The Vrexians just slaughtered 3,000 civilians on New Seoul. Men, women, children. The Galactic Council is calling it a police action." Daeho stepped closer. "I'm offering you a choice, Captain. Follow orders and return to Earth, or help me show the galaxy what happens when someone murders human families." Sang-min looked around the bridge at his officers. Communications Officer Yoo-jin Han, a young woman from the Outer Rim colonies, nodded slightly. Navigation Officer Kang Tae-woo crossed his arms but didn't object. Weapons Officer Park Dong-soo actually smiled. "What are your orders, Your Highness?" the captain asked. "Set course for the Keth-Mora system, best possible speed." "Keth-Mora?" Jin-Woo looked shocked. "That's a Vrexian fortress world. It's defended by an entire battle fleet. It's also where they're holding the survivors from New Seoul," Daeho replied. "Intelligence reports say there are nearly 200 human prisoners in the detention centers there." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what he was suggesting. A direct attack on a major Vrexian military installation would be an act of war, not just against the hegemony, but potentially against the entire Galactic Council. "Sir?" "Communications." Officer Yoo-jin said carefully. "We're just one ship. The Vrexians have 12 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought defending that system. Then we'd better be very good at what we do." Daeho moved to the command chair. "Captain, take us to jump." "Speed." "Jin-Woo, start planning our attack. I want to know everything about their defenses." As the Retribution jumped into hyperspace, Daeho sent a coded message to his sister's ship. So Young commanded the reconnaissance vessel Indomitable, currently. patrolling the frontier sector. If anyone would understand his decision, it would be her. Her reply came back within an hour. Finally, what took you so long? The journey to Keth Mora took 18 hours. During that time, Deho met with his senior officers to plan something that had never been attempted before: a single human warship attacking a fully defended alien fortress world. The traditional approach would be a siege, Jin Woo explained, pointing at the tactical display. Block their supply lines, wait for them to surrender. Traditional approaches take months, Deho replied. How many prisoners do you think will be alive by then? Colonel Kyungmin Choi, the ship's Marine commander, leaned forward. What if we don't try to take the whole planet? Hit fast, grab the prisoners, get out before their fleet can respond. They'll use the prisoners as shields, Weapons Officer Park warned. Standard Vrexian doctrine. Deho was quiet for a moment, thinking about the footage from New Seoul. The Vrexian commander raising his weapon. The children trying to hide behind their parents. Then we show them that using human shields doesn't work on humans, he said finally. The senior officers exchanged glances. They were all experienced military personnel, but what the prince was suggesting went against everything they had been taught about civilized warfare. Your Highness, Captain Sang-min said slowly, if we attack a position where they're using human prisoners as shields, some of those prisoners might die, Deho finished. Yes, I know. He stood up and walked to the view screen showing the swirling colors of hyperspace. But if we do nothing, all of them will die. The Vrexians don't take prisoners to negotiate with. They take them to make examples of. Jin Woo pulled up intelligence files on the Keth Mora system. The detention centers are here, on the northern continent. They're surrounded by anti-aircraft, batteries and shield generators. What about the orbital defenses? 3 defense platforms and a patrol squadron. The main fleet stays in the outer system near the gas giant. Deho studied the tactical display. How long from when we drop out of hyperspace until their fleet can reach us? 47 minutes if they push their engines, Jin Woo calculated. Then, we have 46 minutes to free those prisoners and get out. Deho turned back to his officers. Colonel Choi, I want your Marines ready for immediate deployment. Captain Sang-min, prepare electromagnetic pulse weapons. If we can't break through their shields, we'll knock out their power grid. Sir, Yujin said hesitantly, when we attack, every species in the galaxy will know about it. This will change everything. Good, Deho replied. It's time for change. The Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Keth Mora system exactly 18 hours after leaving Nexus Prime. The Vrexian patrol ships detected them immediately and began broadcasting warnings in their hissing language. Unknown vessel, you are entering restricted hegemony space. Identify yourself immediately or face destruction. Deho took his place in the command chair. Around him, the bridge crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. These were good people, he thought. People who deserved better than watching their species get pushed around by alien bullies. Communications, open a channel to the Vrexian fleet, he ordered. Channel open, sir. Deho looked directly into the camera that would transmit his image to every Vrexian ship in the system. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. This is Prince Deho Kim of the Terran Empire. You are holding human prisoners taken illegally from the colony of New Seoul. You have one opportunity to release them unharmed and surrender your weapons. The reply came back in Chancellor Vorthak's hissing voice. Human prince, you are far from home and greatly outnumbered. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences of your foolishness. I see. Deho nodded to Jin Woo. Then let me show you the consequences of underestimating humans. All stations, battle alert, weapons free. The Retribution's engines flared to full power as the great warship accelerated toward the fortress world. Behind them, the Vrexian fleet began moving to intercept. Ahead, the defense platforms powered up their weapons. EMP torpedoes away, Park reported. Impact in 30 seconds. Marine drop pods launching, Colonel Choi added from the hangar bay. We'll have boots on the ground in 6 minutes. As the first explosions lit up Kethmora's sky, Daeho felt something settle in his chest. Not peace exactly, but a kind of cold certainty. This was what leadership really meant. Not endless committee meetings and diplomatic protocols, but making the hard choices that kept your people alive. The galaxy was about to learn something that humans had always known. Sometimes, the only language bullies understand is violence, and Prince Daeho Kim intended to be very fluent indeed. The electromagnetic pulse bombs hit Kethmora's defense grid like invisible hammers. One by one, the orbital platforms went dark as their power systems overloaded. The planet's shield generators flickered and died, leaving the fortress world naked against the void. Prince Daeho watched from the Retribution's bridge as his Marines landed on the surface below. Colonel Kyungmin Choi's voice crackled over the communications system, calm despite the chaos around him. Landing zone secured. Moving toward the detention centers now. Resistance is lighter than expected. They weren't ready for this kind of attack, Jinwoo observed. The Vrexians have never faced humans who fight like we do. Through the tactical display, Daeho could see the marine assault teams moving through Kethmora's cities. The aliens had expected orbital bombardment followed by negotiations. Instead, human soldiers were kicking down doors and moving building by building toward their objectives. "Contact," came Choi's voice. "Vrexian defensive positions ahead. They're using human prisoners as shields, just like we expected." Daeho felt his jaw tighten. This was the moment he had been dreading. The moment when his choice between diplomacy and war would cost human lives either way. "What are your orders, sir?" Choi asked. On any other day with any other enemy, the answer would be simple. Pull back, negotiate, find another way. But Daeho had seen the footage from New Seoul. He knew what would happen to those prisoners if he showed weakness now. "Take the position," he ordered. "Use precision fire. Save who you can." Understood. The battle for the detention centers lasted 40 minutes. When it was over, 173 human prisoners had been freed. 27 had died in the crossfire, caught between their rescuers and their captors. Extraction complete, Choi reported as the marine transports lifted off from the planet's surface. "All survivors are aboard." "Time until the Vrexian fleet arrives?" Daeho asked. 3 minutes, Jinwoo replied. "Take us out." The Retribution accelerated away from Kethmora just as the Vrexian battle fleet arrived. Behind them, the fortress. World burned. The electromagnetic pulse had knocked out most of the planet's infrastructure, leaving millions of Vrexians in darkness. As they jumped to hyperspace, Daeho knew there would be no going back. He had crossed a line that separated war from peace, civilization from savagery. The galaxy would never see him the same way again. The news of Kethmora's attack reached Earth within hours. Emperor Taejun Kim summoned an emergency session of the Imperial Council. The massive chamber echoed with angry voices as senators and generals debated what to do about the rogue prince. "He started a war we cannot win," shouted Senator Lee Myung-ho. "The entire Galactic Council will turn against us." "He saved human lives that our diplomacy failed to protect," replied General Jae-sung Kang, a veteran of the border wars. "Sometimes that's what leadership means." The Emperor sat silent on his throne, listening to the debate. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. The actions of Prince Daeho were unauthorized and contrary to imperial policy, he announced. The Terran Empire officially disavows his attack on Kethmora. He is to be arrested and returned to Earth for trial. But even as the official condemnation went out, something else was happening across human space. On the mining colonies of the Outer Rim, on the agricultural worlds of the Middle Systems, on the industrial planets of the Core Worlds, people watched the news broadcasts with growing excitement. For the first time in decades, Humans had struck, back against the aliens who pushed them around. The rescued prisoners from New Seoul appeared on every major news network, telling their stories of Rexian brutality and human courage. Captain So-Young Kim was patrolling the frontier sector when she received her recall orders. She was to return to Earth immediately and help coordinate the hunt for her brother. Instead, she ordered her ship to rendezvous with the Retribution at the coordinates Dae-ho had transmitted. She wasn't the only one. Admiral Sang-ho Park, the Emperor's own brother and commander of the Third Fleet, made his choice when he saw the footage from the rescue mission. His entire fleet of 37 warships disappeared from their patrol routes and headed for the Outer Rim. Within a week, Prince Dae-ho had gone from commanding one stolen battlecruiser to leading a rebel fleet of over 60 ships. Veterans, like Admiral Park, brought experience and tactical knowledge. Younger officers brought enthusiasm and a hunger for action that had been suppressed by years of cautious diplomacy. The Galactic Council met in emergency session on Nexus Prime. The Idai Great Hall that had once echoed with careful debates now rang with angry demands for action against the human rebels. "This aggression cannot stand," hissed Chancellor Vorthak, his scales dark with rage. "The humans must be taught their place." Archon Skrilth of the Avian Consortium ruffled his feathers nervously. "Perhaps we should consider negotiations. The attack was limited in scope after all." Limited? The Vrexian Chancellor's forearms gestured wildly. "They crippled an entire world. They murdered thousands of hegemony citizens. They rescued prisoners who should never have been taken," said Ambassador Hai-Jin Park quietly. She had remained loyal to the diplomatic process, but even she couldn't deny the effectiveness of her former students' methods. The debate raged for hours. In the end, 12 alien species agreed to form a coalition against the human rebels. They called it Operation Human Correction, a military action designed to crush Dae-ho's fleet and remind humanity of its proper place in the galactic order. The coalition fleet was massive. 300 warships from a dozen different species, each one confident in their technological and numerical superiority over the primitive humans. They had fought humans before during the border wars and integration conflicts. Human tactics were predictable, their technology limited, their resolve weak when faced with overwhelming force. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. The first engagement took place in the Kepler system, where the human colony of New Busan had declared for Prince Dae-ho. The coalition fleet arrived expecting to find a handful of rebel ships hiding behind the planet's defenses. Instead, they found Admiral Park's Third Fleet waiting for them in open space. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the coalition had lost 47 ships and retreated in disorder. The human losses were much lighter, only 9 vessels damaged, none destroyed. The difference wasn't in technology or numbers. It was in tactics. The coalition species fought the way they always had, following established protocols and accepted rules of engagement. The humans under Dae-ho's command fought like cornered animals, using ramming attacks, overloading reactors as weapons, and boarding actions that turned into slaughterhouses. Captain Dong-hyun became legendary when his damaged cruiser, Souls. Pride lost main power during the battle. Instead of surrendering or retreating, he ordered his crew to plot a collision course with the coalition flagship. The massive alien dreadnought tried to evade, but O had calculated the intercept perfectly. The Soul's Pride punched through the enemy ship's bridge like a spear, killing the coalition admiral and sending shock waves through the entire fleet. As his ship died around him, O transmitted a simple message to his comrades. "Remember New Seoul." News of the Kepler victory spread across human space like wildfire. More colonies declared for Prince Dae-ho. More fleet commanders brought their ships over to his cause. The rebellion was becoming something larger, a revolution that threatened to reshape the entire galaxy. On Earth, Emperor Taejun faced a choice similar to the one his son had confronted on Nexus Prime. Continue with the old ways and watch his people suffer, or embrace the change that was sweeping through human civilization. In the end, blood proved stronger than politics for him as well. Quietly, carefully, he began redirecting supplies and reinforcements to the rebel fleets. Officially, the Empire still condemned Prince Daeho's actions. Unofficially, they made sure he had the tools he needed to keep winning. The galaxy watched, in growing horror as human tactics became more brutal with each engagement. Species that had pushed humanity around for decades suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that would rather die than surrender, that turned every battle into a desperate struggle for survival. The civilized rules of warfare meant nothing to humans who had watched their families burn. Mercy was a luxury they could no longer afford. The Coalition had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power. Instead, they were learning what happened when you awakened something that had crawled out of caves by fighting everything that tried to eat it. 6 months after the Kepler victory, the war had spread across half the galaxy. Prince Daeho now commanded a fleet of over 200 ships from his mobile headquarters aboard the massive battleship Ironhold. What had begun as a rescue mission had become something much darker. Dr. Yoon-ji Yu stood in the research laboratory deep within Ironhold's armored hull, studying the latest reports from the battlefield. As the rebellion's chief scientist, she had been tasked with developing new weapons to counter each alien species' natural advantages. The work troubled her, but she understood its necessity. The sonic disruption devices are ready for deployment against the Vorthak Collective, she reported to Prince Daeho during their weekly briefing. Their crystalline ships will shatter like glass when exposed to the right frequencies. Daeho nodded, his face showing none of the diplomatic warmth that had once made him popular on Nexus Prime. 6 months of war had carved away everything soft, leaving only the hard core of determination that kept him fighting. What about the depths? Federation? The algae modifications are complete. When introduced to their water worlds, it will turn their oceans toxic within weeks. They'll have to abandon their home systems or watch their people die. The prince was quiet for a moment. Before the war, the idea of poisoning entire worlds would have horrified him. Now it was just another tactical option in humanity's growing arsenal of horrors. Deploy both weapons, he ordered. The Coalition wants to fight a war of extermination. Let's show them what that really means. The attacks began simultaneously across 12 star systems. The crystalline ships of the Vorthak Collective were patrolling the Centauri sector when the human fleet arrived. The aliens had expected another conventional space battle. Instead, they found their supposedly indestructible vessels turning to powder as sonic weapons tore them apart at the molecular level. 3 systems away, the aquatic cities of the Depths Federation woke to find their oceans turning green and poisonous. Within days, entire populations were fleeing to colony ships, abandoning worlds their people had inhabited for millennia. The galaxy watched in growing horror as human warfare became increasingly brutal. Captain So-Young Kim, now commanding her own battle group, had earned the nickname the Scythe for her scorched earth tactics. When the insectoid hive queens tried to use their numerical advantage against human forces, she responded by targeting their breeding worlds with engineered viruses that killed only their species. "We're becoming monsters," Jinwoo said quietly as he and Daeho watched reports from the latest battle. "The people we were 6 months ago wouldn't recognize us now." "The people we were 6 months ago failed to protect New Seoul," Daeho replied. "Would you rather we go back to writing diplomatic protests while our colonies burn?" Jinwoo had no answer for that. None of them did. The war had a momentum of its own now, carrying them all toward a darkness they couldn't escape. Intelligence. Officer Yoo Jin Han had built a network of human spies throughout alien space. The information they provided allowed the rebel fleet to strike with devastating precision, hitting enemy supply lines and command centers before melting away into the void. But it was the psychological warfare that truly terrified the coalition. Humans had studied each species' deepest fears and turned them into weapons. The proud avian consortium found their nests burned and their eggs destroyed. The plant-like chlorophyll collective watched their world stripped bare by engineered fungi that consumed all vegetation. "They fight like demons," reported one Vrexian commander whose fleet had barely escaped a human ambush. "They show no mercy, take no prisoners, and seem to actively enjoy our suffering." The truth was more complex. Most humans took no pleasure in the atrocities they were committing, but they had learned to suppress their natural empathy, to see the enemy as obstacles to be removed rather than living beings. It was the only way to keep fighting a war that had consumed everything they once believed about civilization. The turning point came when the coalition attempted their most desperate gambit yet. A stealth fleet of 200 ships launched toward Earth itself, hoping to decapitate the human government and force an end to the war. The fleet was detected at the edge of the solar system by long-range sensors. Prince Dae-ho had been expecting something like this, a final roll of the dice by enemies who had run out of conventional options. "All ships, general quarters," he ordered as the human fleet moved to intercept. "Today we decide whether humanity kneels or stands." The Battle of the Heliopause was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The coalition fleet was larger and better armed, but they were fighting humans who had nothing left to lose. Every engagement became a desperate struggle as human crews pushed their ships beyond safe limits, overloading reactors and weapons systems to squeeze out every advantage. Captain Minho Lim's destroyer Defiant was outnumbered 3-1 when its main drive failed. Instead of surrendering, Lim ordered his crew to abandon ship and then piloted the crippled vessel directly into the coalition flagship. The explosion took out both ships and opened a gap in the enemy formation. Master Sergeant Hyun-Soo Ryu led a boarding party onto a Vrexian dreadnought, fighting through the ship's corridors with nothing but assault rifles and raw determination. When the aliens tried to use their superior strength and natural armor, they discovered that humans had advantages of their own: adaptability, tactical thinking, and a willingness to die rather than retreat. The battle raged for 18 hours. When it ended, the coalition fleet was scattered and broken. 73 alien ships had been destroyed, and the rest were fleeing toward the outer systems. The human losses were severe. 41 vessels lost. But Earth was safe. More importantly, they had captured the coalition flagship Endless Dominion intact. Prince Dae-ho boarded the massive vessel personally, walking through corridors filled with alien prisoners. The ship's command crew had survived the battle, including Admiral Quintal of the Avian Consortium. The alien admiral was a magnificent creature, with golden feathers and fierce eyes that had seen 100 battles. He faced Dae-ho with dignity intact, expecting the honorable treatment that civilized species gave to defeated enemies. Instead, Dae-ho drew his sidearm and shot him in the head. The execution was broadcast across the galaxy. One by one, every alien officer on the ship was brought before Prince Dae-ho and killed. His message was simple and clear. This was what happened to those who threatened human children. The psychological impact was devastating. Several coalition species immediately opened separate negotiations for peace. Others began withdrawing their forces from human space entirely. The proud alien civilizations that had once looked down on humanity as primitive barbarians now feared them as monsters capable of any atrocity. But Dae-ho wasn't interested in partial victories. The war had cost too much, changed too many lives, for it to end with anything less than total victory. He had seen what happened when humans showed mercy to enemies who would exterminate them given the chance. This time, There would be no treaties or negotiations or diplomatic solutions. This time, humanity would fight until every species that had joined the coalition was either conquered or extinct. The prince, who had once believed in peaceful coexistence, was gone forever. In his place stood something harder and more terrible, a man who understood that survival sometimes required becoming the monster that others feared to face. The galaxy had wanted to teach humanity its place. Instead, they had created something that would reshape the stars themselves through the application of unlimited violence in service of an uncompromising will. The real war was just beginning. 1 year after the Battle of the Heliopause, the Galactic Coalition was falling apart. The Crystalline Collective had sued for peace after losing 60% of their population to sonic weapons. The Depths Federation had withdrawn from the war entirely, their remaining forces focused on evacuating poisoned worlds. 3 smaller species had simply surrendered, offering tribute and territory in exchange for survival. But Prince Daeho was no longer interested in half measures. Standing in the war room aboard Ironhold, surrounded by holographic displays showing human fleets advancing on a dozen fronts, he studied reports that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Admiral Sang-Ho Park pointed to the tactical display with a grim expression. The Hive Queens are requesting negotiations. They're offering to cede all territory in the Outer Rim and pay reparations for their part in the coalition. Denied, Daeho said without hesitation. They had their chance for peace before they started this war. Sir, Jinwoo spoke carefully, we've achieved all our original objectives. The colonies are safe, the prisoners have been rescued, and our enemies are retreating on all fronts. Maybe it's time to consider... Consider what? Daeho's voice cut through the room like a blade. Going back to the old system where aliens push us around whenever they feel like it? Writing diplomatic protests while they murder our families? The prince walked to the main display, which showed the current positions of all human fleets. Red icons marked the worlds they had conquered, yellow showed systems under siege, and green indicated Allied territory. Nearly a third of the galaxy was now under human control or influence. They made a choice when they tried to exterminate us, Daeho continued. Now they get to live with the consequences of that choice. Captain So-Young Kim entered the war room, her uniform bearing the insignia of High Admiral. The months of warfare had changed her as much as anyone, turning the cheerful young officer into something harder and more ruthless. The Vrexian home. System is under full siege, she reported. Chancellor Vorthak is requesting terms for surrender. What terms is he offering? Complete withdrawal from all human territories, dissolution of the hegemony military, and personal exile for all government. Officials involved in the New Seoul massacre. Daeho considered this for a moment. A year ago, such terms would have been beyond his wildest dreams. Total victory over the species that had started this war, delivered with their complete humiliation. Now, it wasn't enough. Continue the siege, he ordered. I want their surrender to be unconditional. No terms, no negotiations, no face-saving measures. They kneel or they die. As his senior officers left to carry out their orders, Daeho remained alone in the war room. Through the view screen, he could see the stars that had once seemed so vast and full of possibility. Now they looked smaller, more manageable. Territory, to be conquered rather than explored. The secure communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. His father's face appeared on the screen, looking older and more tired than Daeho remembered. My son, Emperor Taejun said quietly, I know we've had our differences about this war, but what you're doing now, it's going too far. The galaxy is starting to fear us more than they respect us. Good, Daeho replied. Fear lasts longer. Then respect. But at what cost? You've become something I don't recognize, something that frightens even your allies. I've become what humanity needed me to become. What you were too weak to become yourself. The Emperor's face showed pain at his son's words, but he continued. The Galactic Council is prepared to offer a complete settlement. Recognition of all human territorial claims, reparations for every lost colony, and guaranteed representation in galactic government. Everything we ever wanted. Everything you ever wanted, Daiho corrected. I want something more permanent than treaties and promises. Before his father could respond, alarms began sounding throughout Ironhold. Jin Woo's voice came over the communication system, tight with urgency. Your Highness, we have a priority. Alert from intelligence. The Rexians have taken hostages. Daiho cut the connection to Earth and rushed back to the command center. On the main screen was a transmission from Vrex Prime, the hegemony's capital world. Chancellor Vorthak appeared, his scales pale with desperation. Prince Daiho. The alien leader hissed. Your siege has gone too far. Our people are starving, our cities burning, but we are not without resources. The view shifted to show a detention facility on Vrex Prime's surface. Inside were nearly 1,000 human prisoners, including civilians who had been captured during the early months of the war. At the center of the group, clearly visible, was a young man in Imperial Navy uniform, Crown Prince Wu Jin. Vorthak continued, your younger brother, captured when his diplomatic mission was intercepted 6 months ago, along with over 800 other humans taken from various colonies. Daiho felt something cold settle in his stomach. Wu Jin was only 23, fresh from the Imperial Academy, and still believing in the diplomatic solutions their father favored. He had been on a humanitarian mission to negotiate the release of civilian prisoners when his ship was captured. The terms are simple, the Chancellor hissed. End the siege of our worlds, withdraw your fleets to pre-war boundaries, and acknowledge hegemony sovereignty over the disputed territories. Do this, and your brother lives. Refuse, and we will execute every human prisoner, starting with the Yu Crown Prince. The command center fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Vrexians were betting that human sentiment would override military logic, that Daiho's love for his brother would force him to accept defeat just as victory was within reach. They were about to learn the most important lesson about human psychology. Sir, Jin Woo said quietly, what are your orders? Daiho stared at the screen showing his brother's face. Wu Jin looked thin and tired, but alive. The young prince had always been their father's favorite, the one who believed in peaceful solutions and diplomatic compromise. The one who represented everything Daiho had once been. Continue the siege, Daiho said finally. All fleets maximum pressure. I want Vrex Prime's orbital defenses eliminated within 12 hours. But sir, Admiral Park protested, your brother, my brother knew the risks when he chose to serve the Empire. Daiho cut him off. Just as we all did. The mission comes first. But even as he gave the orders, Daiho was already planning something else. That night, as the human fleet tightened its grip around Vrex Prime, a small group of ships detached from the main force and disappeared into hyperspace. The rescue mission would be the most dangerous operation of the war, but it would also demonstrate something crucial to the galaxy. Humans didn't negotiate with terrorists, even when their own families were at stake. They came in force, took what was theirs, and left their enemy's world burning behind them. The Vrexians thought they understood human weakness. They were about to discover human strength instead. The rescue fleet dropped out of hyperspace on the far side of Vrex Prime's moon, hidden from the planet's sensors. Prince Daiho stood in the shuttle bay of his flagship, checking his armor one final time. This mission was too important to delegate to others. Captain Minho Lim commanded the orbital support element while Master Sergeant Hyun-Soo Ryu led the ground assault team. Both were veterans of a dozen battles, but they had never attempted anything as dangerous as infiltrating the Vrexian capital during an active siege. Stealth insertion successful, reported the shuttle pilot as they descended through Vrex Prime's atmosphere. No enemy contacts detected. The planet's surface was a wasteland of bombed cities and burning forests. Months of siege had reduced the once proud hegemony capital to rubble and ash. But somewhere in that devastation, nearly 1,000 human prisoners waited for rescue. The detention facility was located in the planet's capital city, surrounded by the last intact Vrexian defensive positions. Intelligence reports showed it was heavily guarded, with anti-aircraft batteries and shield generators protecting the underground complex. 2 minutes to insertion, the pilot announced. Dae-ho activated his combat suit's systems and checked his weapons one more time. Around him, 30 of the Empire's best soldiers made their final preparations. They all knew the odds. Most of them wouldn't be coming back. Remember, Dae-ho addressed his team over the communication system. We're not here to fight the entire Vrexian army. Get in, free the prisoners, get out. Anyone who wants to be a hero can do it on their own time. The shuttle touched down in the ruins of what had once been a shopping district. Vrexian patrols moved through the debris, but they were focused on the orbital bombardment, not expecting ground forces to penetrate their defenses. Sergeant Ryu led the advance team through the underground tunnel system that connected the city's major buildings. The Vrexians had built these passages as emergency shelters, never imagining they would be used by human infiltrators. Target building in sight, Ryu reported. Counting 12 guards at the main entrance, automated defense turrets on the roof. Electronic warfare support is standing by, added technical specialist Kim Hae-won, the team's cyber warfare expert. I can disable their security systems for 60 seconds. Do it. The attack was swift and brutal. While Hae-won's programs crashed, the facility's defenses, the assault team moved in from multiple directions. The Vrexian guards had been expecting another orbital bombardment, not close-quarters combat with humans who fought like demons. The detention facility's underground levels were a maze of corridors and holding cells. Dae-ho found his brother in a cell near the center of the complex, guarded by 2 Vrexian officers who died before they could raise an alarm. Crown Prince Wu Jin looked up as his cell door opened, his face showing a mixture of relief and concern. Brother, he said quietly, you shouldn't have come. It's too dangerous. Shut up and move, Dae-ho replied, helping his younger brother to his feet. We've got 800 other people to collect. The rescue took 47 minutes from start to finish. As the last human prisoner was loaded onto the extraction shuttles, Vrexian reinforcements began arriving at the facility. But they were too late. The human force had already melted away into the ruins, leaving only bodies and empty cells behind. All prisoners recovered, Ryu reported as the shuttles lifted off. No casualties among our forces. But Dae-ho wasn't finished yet. As the rescue fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, he opened a communication channel to Chancellor Vorthak's Emergency Command Center. This is Prince Dae-ho Kim, he announced, his voice calm and cold. I have something that belongs to you. On the screen, the Vrexian leader's scales had gone completely white with rage. Impossible, he hissed. The facility was impregnable. You still don't understand, Dae-ho replied. There is nothing humans cannot take if we want it badly enough. No defense we cannot breach, no position we cannot assault, no enemy we cannot destroy. He gestured, and the view shifted to show Vrex Prime's capital city from orbit. The rescue operation had been a cover for something larger. While the Vrexians focused on the prison break, human engineers had been planting charges throughout the city's infrastructure. You had your chance to surrender honorably, Dae-ho continued. You chose to threaten human families instead. This is what happens to those who make that choice. The charges detonated simultaneously across the capital city. Government buildings, military installations, and industrial complexes disappeared in balls of fire. Within minutes, the center of Vrexian civilization was a smoking crater. Chancellor Vorthak's image flickered and died as his command center vanished in the explosions. The hegemony's government, its military leadership, and its capacity for organized resistance had been eliminated in a single stroke. All fleets, Daiho ordered, general assault, accept unconditional surrender only. The Vrexian hegemony collapsed within days. Without leadership or central coordination, their remaining forces surrendered system by system. Some tried to flee to neutral space, but human pursuit squadrons hunted them down without mercy. With the hegemony destroyed, the other coalition species began sending desperate peace overtures. The avian consortium offered to become a human protectorate. The remaining hive queens pledged eternal servitude. Even the proud crystalline collective begged for terms. 6 months later, Prince Daiho stood before the assembled representatives of known space in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime. The building had been renamed the Terran Dominion Assembly, and the delegates who had once looked down on humanity now knelt before its new emperor. Emperor Daiho Kim, first of his name, ruler of the Terran Dominion and protector of human space, looked out at the aliens who had once dismissed his people as primitive barbarians. His father had abdicated gracefully, understanding that his son had achieved something he never could: absolute security for the human species. "The old order is dead," Daiho announced to the galaxy. "The age of committees and endless debates while atrocities are committed has ended. In its place rises something new, an empire built on the principle that human lives are sacred, and any who threaten them will face extinction." Admiral Ji-hoon Seo, now Grand Marshal of the Terran Navy, stood at the Emperor's right hand. Captain So-young Kim, now High Admiral of the Dominion Fleet, was at his left. Around the chamber, other human officers who had earned their ranks through blood and courage watched the proceedings with satisfaction. The remembrance protocols were established that same day. Every human child would learn the names of those who died on New Sol and the other lost colonies. They would understand that their freedom had been purchased with blood, and that the price of peace was eternal vigilance. Dr. Yoon-ji Yu became the Dominion's chief scientific advisor, leading research programs that would keep humanity ahead of any potential threats. Intelligence Director Yu Jin-han established monitoring networks throughout alien space, ensuring that no species would ever again be able to threaten human interests without immediate detection. But perhaps most importantly, the new empire established clear rules for the galaxy. Human colonies were under Terran protection, and any aggression against them would be met with overwhelming force. Alien species could govern their own affairs, but only as long as those affairs didn't conflict with human interests. The galaxy had wanted to treat humanity as just another species to be managed and controlled. Instead, they had awakened something that would echo through history: the fury of a people who had clawed their way from caves to starships and would bow to no one. As Emperor Daiho looked out at the stars from his throne room on Ironhold, now the capital of the Terran Dominion, he reflected on the choice that had changed everything. Politics had meant endless compromise and endless suffering for his people. War, however brutal, had brought them absolute victory. Crown Prince Wu Jin, now recovered from his captivity, served as the Dominion's Minister of Colonial Affairs. He had learned the same lesson as his brother, that sometimes civilization's greatest gift was the capacity for controlled savagery when protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The former Prince Daiho had given his species the greatest gift of all: a galaxy where no human child would ever again die, because aliens thought them weak. The Blood Prince had become the Peace Emperor, and his reign would be remembered for 1,000 years. In the end, the Empire would indeed remember his name. But more importantly, they would remember the lesson he had taught them: that humans were not just another species in the galaxy's diverse ecosystem. They were its apex predators, and anyone who forgot that fact would learn it the hard way. The galaxy was now and forever a human place, and that was exactly how Emperor Daiho Kim intended to keep it.